I did not oppose all wars, I said. I was a strong supporter of the war in Afghanistan. But I said I could not support a dumb war, a rash war in Iraq. I worried about a U.S. occupation of undetermined length at undetermined costs with undetermined consequences in the heart of the Muslim world. I pleaded that we finish the fight with bin Laden and al-Qaeda. The political winds were blowing in a different direction. The president was determined to go to war. And there was just one obstacle, the U.S. Congress. 9 days after I spoke, that obstacle was removed. Congress rubber-stamped the rush to war, giving the president the broad and open-ended authority he uses to this day. With that vote, Congress became co-author of a catastrophic war. And we went off to fight on the wrong battlefield with no appreciation of how many enemies we would create and no plan for how to get out. And because of a war in Iraq that should have never been authorized and should have never been waged, we are now less safe than we were before 9/11. According to the National Intelligence Estimate, the threat to our homeland from al-Qaeda is, quote, persistent and evolving. Iraq is a training ground for terror torn apart by civil war. Afghanistan is more violent than it has been since 2001. Al-Qaeda has a sanctuary in Pakistan. Israel is besieged by emboldened enemies, talking openly of its destruction. Iran is now presenting the broadest strategic challenge to the United States and the Middle East in a generation. Groups affiliated with or inspired by al-Qaeda operate worldwide. 6 years after 9/11, we are again in the midst of a summer of threat, with bin Laden and many more terrorists determined to strike in the United States. What's more, in the dark halls of Abu Ghraib and the detention cells of Guantanamo, we have compromised our most precious values. What could have been a call to a generation has become an excuse for unchecked presidential power. A tragedy that united us was turned into a political wedge issue used to divide us. It is time to turn the page. It is time to write a new chapter in our response to 9/11. Now be clear, just because the president misrepresents our enemy does not mean that we do not have enemies. The terrorists are at war with us. The threat is from violent extremists who are a small minority of the world's 1.3 billion Muslims, but the threat is real. They distort Islam, they kill man, woman, and child, Christian and Hindu, Jew and Muslim. They seek to create a repressive caliphate. And to defeat this enemy, we must understand who we are fighting against and what are we fighting for. The president would have us believe that every bomb in Baghdad is part of al-Qaeda's war against us, not an Iraqi civil war. He elevates al-Qaeda in Iraq, which didn't exist before our invasion, and overlooks the people who hit us on 9/11, who are training new recruits in Pakistan right now. He lumps together groups with very different goals, al-Qaeda and Iran, Shia militias and Sunni insurgents. He confuses our mission. And worse, he is fighting the war that the terrorists want us to fight. Bin Laden and his allies know they cannot defeat us on the field of battle or in a genuine battle of ideas. But they can provoke the reaction we've seen in Iraq. A misguided invasion of a Muslim country that sparks new insurgencies, ties down our military, busts our budgets, increases the pool of terrorist recruits, alienates America, gives democracy a bad name, and prompts the American people to question our engagement in the world. By refusing to end the war in Iraq, President Bush is giving the terrorists what they really want and what the Congress voted to give them in 2002, a U.S. occupation of undetermined length at undetermined costs with undetermined consequences. It is time to turn the page. When I am president, we will wage the war that has to be won with a comprehensive strategy with 5 elements. Getting out of Iraq and on the right battlefield in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Developing the capabilities and partnerships we need to take out the terrorists and the world's most deadly weapons. Engaging the world to dry up support for terror and extremism. Restoring our values and securing a more resilient homeland. Let me talk about each of these in turn. The first step must be to get off the wrong battlefield in Iraq and take the fight to the terrorists in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I introduced a plan in January that would have already started bringing our troops out of Iraq with the goal of removing all combat brigades by March 31st, 2008. If the President continues to veto this plan, then ending this war will be my first priority when I take office. There is no military solution in Iraq. Only Iraq's leaders can settle the grievances at the heart of Iraq's civil war. We must apply pressure on them to act, and our best leverage is reducing our troop presence. And we must also do the hard, sustained diplomatic work in the region on behalf of peace and stability. In ending the war, we must act with more wisdom than we started it. That's why my plan would maintain sufficient forces in the region to target all al-Qaeda within Iraq. But we must recognize that al-Qaeda is not the primary source of violence in Iraq and has little support, not from Shia and Kurds who are al-Qaeda targets or Sunni tribes hostile to foreigners. On the contrary, al-Qaeda's appeal within Iraq is enhanced by our troop presence. Ending the war will help isolate al-Qaeda and give Iraqis the incentive and opportunity to take them out. It will also allow us to direct badly needed resources to Afghanistan. Our troops have fought valiantly there, but Iraq has deprived them of the support that they need and deserve. As a result, parts of Afghanistan are falling into the hands of the Taliban, and a mix of terrorism, drugs, and corruption threatens to overwhelm the country. As President, I will deploy at least 2 additional brigades to Afghanistan to reinforce our counterterrorism operations and support NATO's efforts against the Taliban. As we step up our commitment, our European friends must do the same, and without the burdensome restrictions that have hampered NATO's efforts. We must also put more of an Afghan face on security by improving the training and equipping of Afghan army and police, and including Afghan soldiers in U.S. and NATO operations. We must not, however, repeat the mistakes of Iraq. The solution in Afghanistan is not just military. It is political and economic. That's why, as President, I will increase our non-military aid by $1 billion to Afghanistan. And these resources should fund projects at the local level to impact ordinary Afghans, including the development of alternative livelihoods for poppy farmers. And we must seek better performance from the Afghan government and support that performance through tough anti-corruption safeguards on aid and increased international support to develop the rule of law across the country. Above all, I will send a clear message. We will not repeat the mistakes of the past when we turned our back on Afghanistan following Soviet withdrawal. As 9/11 showed us, the security of Afghanistan and America is shared. And today, that security is most threatened by the al-Qaeda and Taliban sanctuaries in the tribal regions of northwest Pakistan. Al-Qaeda terrorists train, travel, and maintain global communications in this safe haven. The Taliban pursues a hit-and-run strategy, striking in Afghanistan, then skulking across the border to safety. This is the wild frontier of our globalized world. There are windswept deserts and cave-dotted mountains. There are tribes that see borders as nothing more than lines on a map, and governments as forces that come and go. There are blood ties deeper than alliances of convenience, and pockets of extremism that follow religion to violence. It is a tough place, but that is no excuse. There must be no safe havens for terrorists who threaten America. We cannot fail to act just because action is hard. As President, I would make hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. military aid to Pakistan conditional, and I would make our conditions clear. Pakistan must make substantial progress in closing down the training camps, evicting foreign fighters, and preventing the Taliban from using Pakistan as a staging area for attacks in Afghanistan.